welcome back to another Steve and Paul production. And we are doing this podcast this week. We just, the way things worked out, we're leaning a little more into technology and doing this over Zoom. I would like to say, Reverend Thompson, that you look particularly awesome today.
Well,
Your health, your vigor, your good looks.
Reverend.Autrey, you must want something from me because you never say anything nice about me unless you want something. Do you need my truck? What do you need?
It's April 1st.
Oh, fell for the trap yet once again.
And I do need your truck, by the way, sometime. But
Yeah.
no, we are recording this on April Fool's Day, which is just a little fun. But one thing that I'm not fooling around about is my good friend Paul Thompson's basketball team is in the Final Four. So congratulations there. Didn't know Auburn was a basketball school.
Well, we haven't been until we really started being really bad at football, and we needed something else to maintain our attention. So thankfully, we paid some guys. Some of them are approaching Social Security age. They're old and
It is
they're
a different world,
basketball.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a different world in college basketball, but hopefully you've had a chance to maybe enjoy a little bit of that. But it should be a great Final Four.
Yeah, my heart usually can't take it to watch them. I get a little too invested.
I know, isn't that kind of crazy how you let a bunch of guys who are several years younger than us determine whether we're happy or not?
Yeah, you would think I'm actually playing in the game the way I'm
Right.
up gyrating
Yep.
and
Well, and the weird thing is the number of people who will admit to the weird superstitions
mm,
about I don't move if they're ahead, or I don't do this, or if, somehow we think that what we do impacts the universe.
yeah,
And in one aspect, theologically, that is true. We believe that God works through us to make a difference in other people's lives. Now, I'm not saying that if I hold my breath that Duke will win, but I'm willing to try it,
whatever it takes.
whatever it
My
takes.
wife has a lucky shirt that she wears, thinking that it's gonna help Kentucky, but so
Yeah.
far didn't help this year.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we have no control over that. But
We
we do
do.
have control over this podcast. So we're going to be talking about the book of Chronicles, and all the stuff that happens in the midst of this. So as you've been reading through this, folks, you probably get the Chronicles and you're like, wait, what? I mean, we wrap up Kings in our reading, but then we move to Chronicles, and it's like, didn't we already read this? And the answer is yes.
Well, we are going to administer a test to our congregations on all of those ancestries in the first few chapters of Chronicles. You're going to have to memorize those. We're going to give you a test, and you have to correctly spell all the
You can't get any of them out of order.
names. And yeah, that's going to be fun.
There's some good names in here. So if you need a name, here's a name.
Yeah, well, I thought the name of the king, Babylon Tiglath-Pileser. That's
Why not?
like a good one.
Put that on a coffee cup.
Yeah, see how that goes.
So, so Paul, what do we need to think about when we take a look at Chronicles?
So to recognize that the books of First and Second Kings, and then what we call First and Second Chronicles, were originally two different books, just two books, not four as we have them in our Bible, and they're written from different perspectives by different parties within the history of Israel. One is written more from the priestly line, and another was written more from the Deuteronomist line. And they take a very different approach and a very different account, even though they're telling some of the same stories. Sometimes you'll note that a king that was listed in Kings as being good is not listed as good in Chronicles, or vice versa. There's a lot of kind of different perspectives on the kings. But what we are doing is we're tracing the history of the kings, basically from Solomon, David Solomon, and then when the kingdom splits, when Rehoboam stays as the king of Judah and Jeroboam becomes the king of Israel, the north and south divide. The 10 northern tribes become what we know as Israel. the southern tribe of Judah, always the biggest tribe and really the predominant tribe, is going to be led by Rehoboam in the line of David. And that line of David is going to stay true for the next 300 and plus years. Whereas the 10 northern tribes are going to go through a real time of upheaval.
Mm.
One king after another, they're killing each other, knocking each other off. But by 722 BC, less than 200 years, we're going to find that the 10 northern tribes have been overrun by a foreign enemy, the Assyrians, and literally will no longer exist as a people.
Yeah, if you've and maybe you've heard the term the lost tribes of Israel, where, well, this is them,
Yeah.
where that comes from. Um, and there's something very important about this split also, because the principal place of worship resides in Judah, not in Israel, which of course would be the temple that Solomon built. And the temple plays a huge part in how Judah, the tribe of Judah, the kingdom of Judah understands itself.
Mhm.
And so they almost become, I guess a word you could use would be temple centric. They felt like as long as that temple's there, we're good. Right.
Mhm.
God, surely that's a sign. Look at that temple. God's with us. As long as the temple's good, we're good. And that's where, and then they even began to, I would say, get stuck at the sign, right? So the temple is a sign that points to God. It's not God. But they began to confuse that to where they began to worship the sign, not what the sign points to. Is that maybe is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what they've done is, in essence, make the temple a place of worship an idol, in the fact that they think because that temple exists, we can't be touched as a people by some foreign military. But we're going to find out that that's simply not the case. So from the time of Rehoboam and Jeroboam, if you remember, Rehoboam is the son of Solomon. He takes over, and I think this is where Steve is going this coming Sunday at Denver, whereas where I went last Sunday at Huntersville.
Always ahead of me, aren't you?
Yeah, just a step ahead of you. Rehoboam has this choice to make. He The people have said, we are tired. We are burdened by the taxation, by the conscription of your father Solomon, Rehoboam, and we need you to back off. We need you to not tax us so much. We need not to have our sons and daughters
We
serve in
need
the
we
kingdom.
need some relief.
Need some relief. And so there's this critical moment where Rehoboam confers with Solomon's older, wiser advisors. And they say, yeah, Rehoboam, you need to let the people know you're on their side. You're gonna
Mm.
listen to them. You're gonna back off. And if you do that, and you're gonna consolidate this kingdom for however long. But then Rehoboam has these younger advisors, and they come and they say, man, really teach
His
this.
boys, huh?
Yeah, let's you think my father Solomon was tough? You ain't seen nothing yet.
Hmm.
And so Rehoboam chooses to follow the advice of the younger crowd and tells the people, look, it's going to get twice as bad. You
Yeah.
thought my father was tough. I'm tougher. And from that moment, the kingdom is torn apart. The
Hmm.
northern tribes, this guy Jeroboam, who's quite the charismatic figure of his own, he then becomes the king of the 10 northern tribes. And from that moment on, then he begins to establish a different place of worship in the
So it
northern tribe places.
right. And so who you listen to really does matter.
Steve, I think that's one of those real important lessons, and I'm glad you're going to be speaking to your confirmation class about that on Sunday. All of us, none of us have a corner on truth. We all have decisions to make, and seeking advice and wise counsel is always a good thing. But boy, you better be careful who you listen to.
Hmm.
And certainly in this particular case, Rehoboam, he listened to the wrong people.
And and we think, well, we would never do that, but we do.
Yeah, I think about the wisdom of my parents, even though good Lord's taken them on home, or received them on home. So many lessons in life. If I just remember what my parents would say, I do feel like they never they never led me wrong. They always told me the things I
Well,
didn't want to hear, but things I needed to hear.
and with the way we source information now, we gosh, how many people spend I mean, we give podcasters and we give um, all kinds of folks enormous sway in our decision making. And some of it, I mean, again, you can find good advice. It's out there. But you can also find people who'll tell you all kinds of crazy things that should not be heeded. And yet we tend to want to we tend to want somebody to tell us what to do. And there are people out there who are very willing to tell us what to do. So we've got to be, where do you source information from? Where do you source wisdom from? Scripturally speaking, the Bible tells us if you lack wisdom, ask God for it.
Mm,
Yeah, don't ask your AM radio for it, or don't ask your cable package for it. Ask God for it,
yeah.
and go from there.
And where I went on Sunday, I still think it's true. Most of us really struggle with pride, arrogance, and what the Bible refers to as hubris. This idea that we really want to control our own fate. We really think we are the masters of our own destiny. We really think that we are more important than anything God could be doing, and how often that sends us down paths of destruction.
Mhm. Right. Well, and as a nation as a whole, I mean, you get the division, and we can't understate how important this is. This is the seismic event that separates these tribes that will effectively end 10 of them, will sequester Judah all on their own. And then, um, the project of God having a family looks like it is on thin ice.
So when you start doing your reading over these next number of weeks, and you go back through Kings, finish Chronicles, you're going to hear these stories of the kings. And one of the things the Bible is really clear about is how the influence of the king, whether the king did right in the sight of God or whether the king did wrong in the sight of God, really becomes the predominant lesson. Uh, we can pull from this idea that leadership is important,
Mhm.
especially whether it be from a king, a president, a governor, a mayor, a
Aaron,
pastor, and all sorts of that. And truly, leadership is often held to a level of accountability. And I think it's a lesson that you can draw from these. Really, it's a really difficult reading, and often to think about, who are these kings? Is this the king in Israel? Is
it's
it
hard to keep them all straight. And it's hard to tell, wait a second, where are we? Are we in Israel? Or are we in Judah? Even that language by itself confuses us, or at least confuses me, because I think of Israel in terms of Israel today, not as of Israel as in 700 BC. So it
so
can be a
that's
little
going to be
confusing.
a
And
fascinating
and
reading.
and then when we get into the prophets, we'll find that sometimes they're going back and forth between the two nations.
Yeah, yeah. We'll note that some kings will travel from the south in Judah to go to speak to a problem in the north, and then vice versa.
And I'm sure people from the north were still coming down to worship at the temple
Yeah.
when they
And
could.
then as
So
we then after Easter, when we kind of get back into the reading of the prophets and Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel and all that, then it's even going to be more confusing, because we're going to cover some ground we've already plowed, but we're going to look at it from the perspective of that
well,
particular prophet.
and I think this is important. I know some people in discussing this with me have expressed just a little frustration of, well, didn't we already read this? And like, but the Bible does that in the New Testament too. I mean, we get four accounts of Jesus's life, not one. So, in some aspect, we should recognize this is how the Bible is written, not just from one point of view, but from often multiple points of view, dealing with the same situation, but telling the story from a different perspective, which gives you a slightly different take on it. And I know some people get upset and they're like, well, you're saying the Bible contradicts itself. Well, what I'm saying is it's such a big subject matter, you can't take it all in with one viewpoint. And
Mhm.
so the Bible gives us several different points of view around the same events to
So
give
what?
a more robust understanding of what's going on.
And so we're all talking about, and we're going to be really for the next couple of months, talking about the same period of time from the time when the kingdom is kind of separated in rough and dirty 920 BC until Judah finally falls. Jerusalem, the capital, is besieged in 587. With Israel, the northern tribes, their destruction in 722 BC, you're looking at a rough and dirty 350 year period.
Mm.
This becomes a cataclysmic time in the life of the people
Right.
of Israel.
And last week we discussed, or at least in a previous episode, how David and Solomon collectively are the only times Israel's united. And it's the only time they get a whiff of importance on the international stage. With this split and with the two kingdoms, they quickly become uh, vassal states for other people. They lose a lot of their strength and their importance. And they go from having Solomon, who was revered around the world, or at least the known world, where people would come to him as in kind of a big deal, and they would come and gawk at the temple he built, to being an afterthought among the Egyptians and the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and all the other world powers.
Yeah, what you're going to find is the power of Assyria, the Sennacherib and subsequent kings. They are the ones who are the big looming threat on the horizon.
And
Verse 4,
geographically, that would be, located what
today
we now
Iran,
know as
Iran.
Syria, Iraq, Iran,
Yeah, around the Fertile Crescent, that those Tigris and Euphrates rivers.
which
That
is where Abraham began his journey.
yeah,
So a
yeah.
lot of things do come full circle.
And then after the Assyrians fade in national importance, then it's the
Yeah.
Babylonians
The Babylonians come in and take over.
take over from Assyria. And they're the ones who eventually besiege Jerusalem, and they eventually take the king of Judah into captivity. You'll hear this horror story about they pluck his eyes out and he's blinded, and so some real difficult reading, some just gut-wrenching reading about what's going to take place. And all of this is said to be part of how God is at work in the world, which for us is often really difficult for us to to grasp. But that's exactly how this Hebrew scriptures presents this: is that this is working towards somewhere where God is at work in the world, even through this.
Yeah. So what we're caught up in First and Second Chronicles is how they tell their own story. And it is, in sense, it's a history. We're going to chronicle what's happened from creation up until present day, which will take us all the way back from Adam and Eve, basically, to Abraham and so forth and so on. So you get the history, you get the genealogies. If you're reading this in the KJV, you get the begats. There are a lot of begats in here. Um, and and so don't give up on it, but it is, it can be a little dense at times as you read through it.
So this is the point where I would suggest that you remember that the Bible does have this single thread, a single thread that we start in the book of Genesis. We'll find this thread and through all the way to the book of Revelation, the last book of the Bible. And it is this idea that God has been at work. He chooses to work through the people called Israel. He chooses to have this King David, who is both kind of a military figure, but also a quasi-religious figure.
Yeah.
And it is how God is going to intervene in human history through one from the line of David, who is going to be this idyllic king and priest who ends up being the sacrifice that God gives is this is how I'm at work in the world for the redemption of the world. And we're going to see the final results of that redemption. That's the picture we see in the book of Revelation. So just try to hold on to this whole big long story. There is a thread, a common thread that runs from beginning to end. And that thread in a big sense is how is God at work in this plan to save the world from itself?
Mm, yeah. And the principal problem is us.
The principal problem is our pride, our arrogance, our hubris,
Well,
our
and if you're
desire
looking,
to be our
right,
own gods.
if you're looking for themes, that one that's established in Genesis is God and we are not.
Yeah.
And we still struggle with that. We certainly struggle with that through the Old Testament, New Testament, and we struggle with that now.
Mhm. Yeah, so many of the kings were acting, when you are given some power, man, it corrupts. And then you are given, in so many cases, the absolute power. It absolutely corrupts. And so much of what you see in these stories is a king who really comes to the throne at an early age. I mean, they're put there,
Mhm.
my father was king, I'm going to follow up.
Yeah.
And they're just drunk with that power. And they're making decisions that are absolutely against everything that God has ever said. We
And
see this tendency to introduce these foreign gods. They're gonna be worshiping all of these various gods when the one call is to worship the Lord and worship Him only.
well, and that makes me think about the difference between David being held up as the ideal king. David comes from the lowly estate of being the youngest son shepherding the sheep, right? So David was grounded. I mean, yeah, he will lose some of that grounding along the way, but overall, he does maintain the sense of who's God,
Mhm.
not him. And so when you're taking people who are born into extraordinary privilege and handing them the kingship, they care little for the common person,
Mhm.
right? And one of the themes you'll see throughout the Bible is how are you caring for the widow, the orphan, and the stranger among you? Those seems to be God's standards, not, oh, how much gold do you have in your palace, or how many concubines do you have in your household, or how many, it it's a different God's way of measuring what is good is very different than what these kings do and often what we do.
Well, the story I'm going to share with the folks at Huntersville on Sunday is the story of King Hezekiah. And King Hezekiah, his father was a disaster. Well, maybe one of the worst kings ever. But Hezekiah really is doing a lot of good, but he makes a fatal mistake. He has people come in to visit from Babylonia, and they're going to offer him, hey, we'd like to come wish you a happy birthday. And he shows them all of the gold, all of the silver, and the treasury of the temple. And the prophet comes and says, "Did you really show them all that?" And he says, "Yeah, I did." And they're going to say to him, "Look, they're going to come back and steal it. They're going to
Yeah, right.
in the
Yeah.
kingdom. It's not going to go well for you." And it's like, what have I done? So lots of power drunk people, and I'm afraid it hasn't gotten any better in our day and age. I'm afraid we've still got people for whom a little bit of power seems to go straight to our heads,
And a lot of power goes even deeper.
goes even deeper. And so we still have that struggle today.
Right. And this feeling that we're not the only people who've ever felt like those who in leadership are very disconnected from the normal run-of-the-mill person, the
Mhm.
regular citizen, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, I've
Uh,
often told the story of, if we had name your favorite sports hero, name a favorite politician you have. If suddenly I announce, okay, that person's going to be at church Sunday, attendance is going to increase.
mhm.
We're going to
Oh
come
yeah,
out to see
yeah.
their favorite politician, celebrity,
So
athlete.
like if you were to put out there, hey, at Huntersville United Methodist Church, Taylor Swift's going to be leading worship. How many people would come?
Yeah, gonna guess we're gonna get a few extra Swifties on that Sunday.
Oh yeah. And then
But
they would walk
that's
out right before you preached.
yeah, and that's the way. That's unfortunately the way we work. We tend to have that fallacy. We
Yeah.
tend to follow that fallen path.
We certainly do. I was just curious about something I'm looking up right here. Um, so this is, of course, this isn't official, but the majority of our people in Congress are millionaires. That's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, if they weren't millionaires before they got there, it didn't
So
want to long
for the
look to
first
get there.
time, most lawmakers are worth 1 million plus.
Mhm.
And so, it's very, I mean, so you think about where we've got people that are supposed to represent us. Now, I know you are probably a multimillionaire just
Oh,
based on your good looks alone,
yeah, yeah.
but it's kind of hard to think that someone who's a millionaire could relate to what it feels like to struggle with, um, which bill am I going to pay this month?
Mm. Yeah, that's where people in power tend to they get corrupted. They tend to think, man, I'm not worried about these
Well,
people
it's
anymore.
very easy to lose perspective. And I do think that most people go or get into it with really good intentions.
Mm.
But it again, people get lost in it and and it's a very dicey situation to hold on to your values when you're being compelled by other things. And that again shows up in the book of First and Second Kings, it shows up in Chronicles, it will show up throughout Scripture. Um,
Well, and let's be clear, it happens to the clergy of our day, and it also happened to the priests of their day.
mhm,
Oftentimes the kings would have prophets, priests who catered to them and told them exactly what they wanted
exactly
to do,
what they wanted to
what
hear. You'll
God would.
see that a lot in Jeremiah.
Yeah.
And like Jeremiah doesn't tell them what they want to hear, so they go find somebody who will tell them what they want to hear.
Mhm.
And again, in our time and age, you can always find somebody who will tell you what you want to hear with the right search of the internet. So
Yeah, our presidents typically surround themselves with people who, yeah, tell me how good I am, tell me how smart, faithful, and right I am. And typically, if they tell them a dissenting opinions, no, you're not going to be here long.
yeah, I think it's an interesting thing. I think historically, when I think about Abraham Lincoln and he brought people into his cabinet he knew didn't agree with him because he wanted the best people, not to be told he was great. Now, I know we're looking back through the lens of history and kind of making maybe Lincoln into something he wasn't, but I don't know. It's just an interesting thing that he had the humility to listen to people who were his political rivals and even put them in his cabinet because of, but it's hard to imagine that kind of thing happening today in either political party.
But
But
it
let's
is
move
my
away from that. That's just
Well,
depressing.
it is my assertion that humility is the truest Christian characteristic. You can talk a lot about love, we can talk about compassion, but humility, I think, is the truest Christian
Well,
characteristic. And the
it
same is
opens the
true.
door to everything else.
Yeah.
If humility opens the door to wisdom, humility opens the door to learning. You're not going to listen. I mean, humble people will listen to others and think things through. Um, an arrogant person, they don't care what your opinion is. They know it all already. So, and again, you mentioned it happens to clergy. So we picked on politicians enough. Let's pick on our own tribe because we do that a lot. I mean, how many times have I, in the United Methodist Church, your pastors are the chairs of the nomination committee. And so we have a lot of control over who gets appointed to or asked to lead the church. And one of the things that is, that's a difficult task sometimes. And we have to be careful not just to put people into positions because we know they may like us or agree with us.
Yeah.
Um, and let me tell you, it's no fun having disputes in church. It's no fun having hard conversations in leadership groups, but those are necessary and needed if we are to get to the right place.
Yeah. the really good lessons that I think the Bible almost, just in our face forces us to grapple with with this understanding. And it is, if we want to learn from the lessons of history, uh, the most powerful lesson for me at this moment seems to be humility really is a requirement. If you think you have it, you don't. And so it's always, and always looking yourself
But
in the mirror and questioning.
the great thing about life is it's always offering us lessons in humility. And I would say being a parent offers you a lot of lessons in humility too.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, Leading a church, leading anything. So it's not, it's just a question. It's not whether the lessons are out there. It's the question is whether we will learn from them or not. Um,
So this coming Sunday at Denver, you've got what do you got going? Got your confirmation Sunday?
yeah, we've got a group of that Pastor Ben has led through, been working with since the first of the year, taking them through um, confirmation. We rebranded that several years ago. We call it launch. The idea is how do we help these kids launch into their Christian lives and launch into the world? And Ben does a tremendous job with that. So we have uh, that at 11. So 9 o'clock will be pretty much a normal 9 o'clock service, and we will have communion at 9 o'clock. And then at 11 o'clock, we will receive the confirmation class. Uh, and then we will offer communion for those who want it in the chapel following the 11 a.m. service. The confirmation itself will probably take up the bulk of the service. So if you would like to have communion, then either come to the 9 o'clock service or stick around after the 11 and it will be served in our chapel.
Yeah. So for Sunday at Huntersville United Methodist Church, it's one of our Unity Sundays. Every time there's a first Sunday of the month, which we will be this coming Sunday, we have a Unity Sunday. Means we start with kind of a breakfast offering at around 9:30. From 9:30, we have time of fellowship. The service, worship service begins at 10. And then in that service, we will have the sacrament of Holy Communion. We've got two kind of adult baptisms this week as part of the service, which
Excellent.
is always fascinating and great to journey with people as they find their way to these waters of baptism and the claiming that God does in that work. So, really good Sunday coming at Huntersville United Methodist Church.
Yeah, well, um, and hopefully come Sunday, I know your Auburn guys play Florida. My Duke team plays Houston, so who knows? We may have to talk
We,
again.
I sure would enjoy if Duke and Auburn end up in the final game. We'd have a lot of fun with that.
But we'll just have to wait and see. And at the end of the day, it is only a game.
It's a basketball game. So. Well,
Just
folks, as always, I hope you've hung with us during this time. Thank you so much for the time and attention you give us. We do value it and appreciate it, and hope that this is a good conversation starter for you.
absolutely. Thank you, Paul, and thank you to all of you for giving us a little of your time.
All right, grace and peace to you.
Take care.